I am Eva, 29, and I was so excited about my wedding and dream honeymoon in Hawaii with my fiancé, James. My family has always been heavily involved in my life choices, but this honeymoon was supposed to be different. It was our special time together as newlyweds. I never imagined they would try to take control of even this when they started making honeymoon plans without asking. I knew something had to change. Let me know where you are watching from, and if your family has ever crossed boundaries like mine did. Drop a like, subscribe, and stick around to hear how I finally stood up for myself. James and I met at the cozy little coffee shop where I worked during my college years. He came in every morning for his Americano always, with a warm smile that brightened my day. At first, we exchanged nothing more than pleasantries, but eventually he started staying longer, finding a table near the counter where I worked. After 3 months of this sweet routine, he finally asked me out. Our first date was at a local art gallery exhibition. I remember being nervous changing my outfit 5 times before settling on a floral dress. James arrived with a single sunflower, saying it reminded him of my smile. That thoughtful gesture told me everything I needed to know about him. Over our 5 years together, our relationship blossomed into something beautiful and secure. James was my rock, the calm presence who balanced my sometimes anxious nature. He proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, getting down on one knee in the sand. The ring was his grandmother's, a vintage piece he'd had restored. It was intimate and perfect, just the two of us, exactly how we wanted our relationship to be. My family, on the other hand, had very different ideas about how things should be done. My mother, Diana, was what you might politely call a controlling perfectionist. She had an opinion about everything and believed that her way was invariably the right way. Her intentions were good, she wanted the best for her children, but her version of best often overshadowed what we actually wanted for ourselves. My father, Howard, was the definition of passive. He rarely contradicted my mother, preferring to keep the peace rather than cause waves. Over their 35 years of marriage, had perfected the art of nodding along while reading the newspaper, occasionally murmuring agreement without really listening. His enablement of my mother's controlling behavior had solidified her belief that her actions were always justified. My sister Amanda was 2 years younger than me, but always trying to compete. If I got a B plus, she needed an A. If I ran a mile in 8 minutes, she had to do it in 7. This competitive streak extended to life milestones too. When I announced my engagement, she immediately started hinting to her boyfriend about proposals. Then there was my brother Patrick, the family peacemaker. The youngest at 24, he somehow became the most emotionally mature, always mediating family disputes and finding compromises. He was the buffer between all our strong personalities, the one who could usually talk sense into our mother when she went too far. My family had been over-involved in my life for as long as I could remember. When it came time for college, my mother researched universities for months, ultimately presenting me with her top 3 choices. When I mentioned wanting to study art, she dismissed it as impractical and guided me toward business instead. I ended up with a business degree with a minor in graphic design as a compromise. When I graduated and started apartment hunting, my parents insisted on coming along to every viewing. My father checked electrical outlets and water pressure, while my mother questioned landlords about neighborhood crime statistics and the moral character of neighbors. They contributed to my security deposit, which became justification for having a set of keys and dropping by unannounced. My career path followed a similar pattern. My mother found job postings that she thought were suitable, forwarded my resume without telling me, and was confused when I wasn't grateful for her initiative. I finally found a marketing position at a small agency that I loved, but only after 3 jobs that had been essentially chosen for me. James' family situation was entirely different. His parents lived across the country in Oregon, and while they were loving and supportive, they firmly believed in letting their children make their own choices and mistakes. They visited twice a year, called weekly, but never imposed their opinions unless explicitly asked. I found their approach refreshingly respectful. Hawaii had been our dream honeymoon destination for years. We both loved the ocean, hiking, and exploring local cultures. We started researching islands activities and accommodations 2 years before the wedding, creating a shared document where we saved ideas and budget plans. We set up a separate savings account for the trip, contributing monthly. By the time we got engaged, we had already saved nearly half the amount needed. We envisioned a perfect balance of relaxation and adventure, splitting our time between Maui and Kauai. We planned to stay in a beachfront cottage, go snorkeling with sea turtles, hike the Nepali coast, and experience a traditional luau. We researched local restaurants away from tourist areas and found a highly rated couples massage package. Every detail was chosen thoughtfully to create the romantic, once-in-a-lifetime experience we both wanted. When wedding planning began, both families were initially excited and supportive. James' parents offered to host the rehearsal dinner, while my family took on more day-to-day planning tasks due to their proximity. It seemed like everything was going smoothly. The first warning sign came when my mother started making suggestions about the wedding that gradually transformed into demands. The venue I loved was too far from the church. The color scheme I chose wouldn't photograph well. The flower arrangements I wanted were out of season and therefore impractical. Each opinion was presented as helpful advice from someone with more experience, making it difficult to push back without seeming ungrateful. I tried to include her in the decision-making process without surrendering control completely. I asked her to help with researching caterers, giving her a clear budget and our preferred menu style. Somehow she still managed to schedule tastings with companies that were well over budget, but that she deemed more appropriate for a proper wedding. Looking back now, I should have recognized these red flags for what they were, the beginning of a pattern that would eventually threaten to overshadow one of the most important experiences of my life. James and I had spent countless evenings perfecting our honeymoon itinerary. We planned to spend 5 days on Maui, staying at a boutique hotel near Wailea Beach. Our planned activities included a sunrise tour at Haleakala Volcano, snorkeling at Molokini Crater, and driving the road to Hana. Then we'd fly to Kauai for 6 more days, where we'd reserved a private cottage near Hanalei Bay. There we'd hike the Kalalau Trail, take a sunset catamaran cruise along the Napali coast, and spend lazy mornings drinking coffee on our private lanai overlooking the ocean. We were particularly excited about a private cooking class we'd booked, where we'd learn to prepare traditional Hawaiian dishes with local ingredients. Every restaurant had been researched with specific dishes noted that we wanted to try. We even had a day set aside for spontaneity with nothing scheduled so we could just follow our whims. About 3 months before the wedding, we shared the basic outline of our honeymoon plans during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. We kept most details private as this was our special trip, but mentioned the islands we were visiting and our general time frame. My mother, Diana, immediately peppered us with questions. What hotels had we booked? Had we considered upgrading to ocean view rooms? Did we know that May was actually not the best time to visit Hawaii? And had we checked the weather forecasts? Her questions became increasingly specific, but I brushed them off with vague answers, changing the subject to wedding details instead. A week later, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some wedding invitation samples and found my mother hunched over her laptop. She quickly minimized the screen when I walked in, but not before I caught a glimpse of hotel websites for Hawaii. When I asked what she was looking at, she waved dismissively and said she was just curious about the places we'd be staying. I should have addressed it then, but I dismissed it as harmless maternal interest. After all, she had always been interested in travel and often researched destinations, even when she had no plans to visit them. That evening, James expressed his first concerns. We were having dinner at our apartment when he asked somewhat hesitantly if I thought my family might try to get too involved in our honeymoon plans. I laughed it off. Even my mother wouldn't go that far, I assured him. A honeymoon was different from a regular vacation. Surely everyone understood that this was private time for newlyweds. James looked unconvinced but nodded. I think we should keep most of the specific details to ourselves from now on, he suggested. I agreed, thinking that would be sufficient to maintain our privacy. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with multiple text notifications while I was at work. It was my mother sending links to different hotels in Hawaii than the ones we'd chosen. Have you seen this place, she wrote. Much better amenities than where you're looking and only slightly more expensive. Worth the splurge for your honeymoon. This was followed by links to activities and tours different from the ones we'd carefully selected. I felt a twinge of annoyance, but reminded myself that she was just trying to help. Still, I decided it was time to establish some boundaries. That evening, I called her and explained as politely but firmly as I could that while I appreciated her interest, James and I had already done extensive research and were happy with the plans we'd made. But honey, she replied, her voice taking on that hurt tone I knew so well. I'm only trying to help. You and James are so busy with work and wedding planning. I thought you'd appreciate having another set of eyes looking out for better options. I took a deep breath. Mom, it's our honeymoon. It's important that we plan it ourselves based on what we want to experience together. There was a pause on the line. Fine, she said eventually. I was just trying to be helpful, but if you don't want my input, that's your choice. There was clearly an unspoken, but you are being ungrateful hanging in the air. I ended the call feeling guilty despite knowing I had every right to plan my own honeymoon. James found me staring at my phone with a troubled expression and asked what was wrong. I explained the conversation, and he hugged me, saying I had handled it perfectly. But the boundary I thought I'd established crumbled almost immediately. At the next family dinner, my mother announced to everyone, including James' parents who were visiting, that she'd found better options for our Hawaii trip. I found this adorable bed and breakfast on Kauai, she declared, pulling out printed pages from her folder. It's run by a couple who've lived on the island for 30 years, so they know all the local secrets. And look at the view from the balcony. Much nicer than that corporate hotel you're considering. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and frustration as everyone at the table leaned in to look at her research. Even James' father, normally so respectful of boundaries, seemed interested in the alternatives she was presenting. And there's this luau. She continued, oblivious to my discomfort. It's much more authentic than the commercial one in your itinerary. I actually spoke with the owner on the phone yesterday, and he said he'd be happy to reserve spots for you. My stomach dropped. She'd been calling places in Hawaii. This had gone beyond mere research. James squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. I tried to redirect the conversation back to wedding details, but the damage was done. My sister Amanda asked if we'd considered island hopping to the Big Island as well, while my father started sharing stories about a colleague who apparently knew all the hidden beaches on Maui. What had been our private, carefully crafted dream was suddenly becoming a family project, with everyone offering opinions on what had taken us years to plan. The intimate honeymoon we'd envisioned was being slowly transformed into something else entirely, something shaped by others' expectations rather than our desires. As we drove home that night, I could feel a growing knot of discomfort in my chest. James was unusually quiet, and I knew he was troubled too. This is just how they show love, I told him, and partly myself. They'll back off once they realize we're serious about our plans. But even as I said it, I wasn't entirely convinced. The look on my mother's face when she shared those alternative accommodations had been one of absolute certainty that her choices were superior. And experience had taught me that once Diana believed she knew best, she rarely backed down. A week after the family dinner, I received a call from the small boutique hotel in Maui, where we'd booked our stay. The manager was calling to confirm that we wanted to cancel our ocean view room and rebook a garden view suite instead. Confused, I told her I hadn't requested any changes. After some discussion, she explained that someone named Diana had called claiming to be helping with my honeymoon arrangements. According to the manager, my mother had spent nearly an hour discussing different room options and amenities. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief as I assured the manager to keep our original booking and to not accept any changes unless they came directly from me or James with our confirmation code and other identifying information. That same day, James discovered something equally disturbing. My sister Amanda had created a shared Google document titled Eva's Honeymoon Planning and invited all family members to contribute. The document already contained numerous sections with alternatives to our carefully selected restaurants' activities and even suggested daily itineraries different from what we'd planned. When James showed me the document on his laptop, I felt sick. There were comments from my mother, father, sister, and even some extended family members, all offering suggestions and opinions on how we should spend our honeymoon. Is nothing sacred? James asked, his voice tight with frustration. It's our honeymoon, Eva, not a family vacation. I nodded, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. I should have shut this down more firmly from the beginning. I don't know why they think this is appropriate. The next few weeks brought an onslaught of family involvement. Every day I received texts, emails, or calls with new suggestions for our honeymoon. My mother sent articles about Hawaii weather patterns and tourist crowds in May. My sister forwarded TripAdvisor reviews of restaurants she'd found. My father sent links to YouTube videos of various beaches and hiking trails, with notes about which ones he thought we'd enjoy most. I tried to channel their enthusiasm toward wedding planning instead. I asked my mother for help with the seating chart, my sister with the music playlist, and my father with transportation logistics. But while they took on these tasks, they didn't stop their honeymoon research. The situation escalated when I checked my email one evening and found a confirmation for a hotel booking I hadn't made. My mother had somehow used my email address to upgrade our hotel reservation in Kauai, switching us from the private cottage we'd selected to a larger suite in the main building of a different resort. The price difference was substantial, nearly $500 more than we'd budgeted. I immediately called my mother, no longer bothering to hide my frustration. "Mom, why did you change our hotel reservation without asking us?" "Eva," she replied brightly, "I found a much better place. The resort has 3 pools, a spa, and 6 restaurants on site. The cottage you chose was charming, but so isolated. This will give you many more options." "But we wanted isolation," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "And the price difference is significant." "Consider it part of our wedding gift," she said dismissively. "You only get one honeymoon. It's worth spending a bit more." I took a deep breath. "Mom, please cancel this new reservation. We were happy with our original choice." Her tone immediately changed. "After all the work I did researching to find you the perfect place, that's the thanks I get. I was only trying to make your honeymoon special." By the time I ended the call, I felt emotionally exhausted. James had heard enough to understand what happened, and his expression was grim. "This has to stop, Eva," he said firmly. "If we don't set clear boundaries now, they'll never respect our decisions as a married couple." I knew he was right, but confronting my family, particularly my mother, was daunting. Their intentions were good, I kept telling myself. They wanted to help create a wonderful experience for us, but their help was feeling more like a hijacking. At the next Sunday family dinner, I decided to set firmer boundaries. After the main course, while everyone was still seated at the table, I spoke up. "James and I appreciate all your interest in our honeymoon." I began making eye contact with each family member. "But we've put a lot of thought into planning this trip ourselves, and we'd really prefer to keep the arrangements as we originally planned them. I hope you can respect that this is our special time as newlyweds." There was a moment of awkward silence before my mother set down her fork with a clatter. Her eyes were already welling with tears, a response I should have anticipated. "I didn't realize our help was such a burden," she said, her voice trembling. "All I've ever wanted was to create perfect memories for you. You've been so busy with work and wedding planning, I thought you'd appreciate having someone look out for options you might have missed." My father immediately jumped to her defense. "Your mother has spent hours researching to make sure you have the best experience possible," he said. "She's only thinking of you." Patrick, ever the peacemaker, intervened. "I think what Eva means is that this is a really personal trip for them," he explained gently. "It's not about whether the help is valuable. It's about them creating their own experience as a new married couple." But my sister Amanda was already shaking her head. "If you don't want advice, you shouldn't have shared your plans in the first place," she said. "We were just trying to improve on what you had already started." James sat silently beside me, his jaw tense. I could feel his disappointment as I began to waver under the family pressure. "Maybe we could look at some of your suggestions," I said finally, my resolve weakening. "We don't have to make any changes, but we can at least consider them." My mother's face brightened immediately, and the tension around the table dissipated. As we moved to the living room for dessert, she brought out a folder thick with printouts, hotel brochures she'd somehow acquired, and handwritten notes. James caught my eye across the room, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resignation. I felt guilty and trapped, torn between my family expectations and my relationship. I had tried to set a boundary, but had crumbled at the first sign of resistance. It was a pattern that had been established long ago, and breaking it was proving harder than I had anticipated. 2 months before the wedding, I was sorting through emails when I noticed several confirmation messages for bookings in Hawaii that I hadn't made. There were reservations for sunset cruises, guided hikes, restaurant tables, and even a helicopter tour we'd specifically decided against due to James' fear of heights. Each confirmation was in my name using my email address. Somehow, my mother had obtained enough of my personal information to make these arrangements without my explicit permission. I felt violated and increasingly angry. That same evening, James discovered that my family had created an entirely new itinerary for our honeymoon day by day, hour by hour, completely different from what we'd planned. They had shared it in a new document titled Eva's Honeymoon Final Itinerary, as if our original plans were merely a rough draft for them to perfect. The next morning, my mother called with what she described as wonderful news. "I got you first-class upgrades for your flights to Hawaii," she announced triumphantly. "It cost a bit more, but I managed to use some of my credit card points to offset the difference." I gripped my phone tightly. "Mom, we didn't ask for flight upgrades. We were fine with the economy seats we'd booked." "But it's your honeymoon," she exclaimed. "You don't want to arrive tired and cramped. First class will make such a difference, especially on a long flight like that." I wanted to argue, but felt the familiar resignation settling in. It was becoming clear that my family, especially my mother, had no intention of respecting our wishes regarding the honeymoon. Later that week came the most shocking revelation yet. During a seemingly casual phone call with my aunt, she mentioned how excited she was about potentially seeing us in Hawaii. "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Oh," she hesitated, seeming to realize she'd said something she shouldn't have. "I thought you knew. Diana mentioned the dates you would be on each island, and it turns out your uncle and I will be in Maui the same week. She thought it might be nice if we met for dinner one evening." I ended the call as quickly as I could without being rude, then immediately called James at work, something I rarely did. When I told him what I'd learned, there was a long silence on the line. "Eva," he finally said, his voice unusually serious. "We need to talk when I get home." That evening, James sat me down at our kitchen table. His expression was resolute, and I knew whatever he was about to say was important to him. "I can't do this," he said simply. "I can't go on a honeymoon that's been planned by your family where they might show up at any moment. That's not a honeymoon, it's a family vacation." I nodded, feeling tears well in my eyes. "I know. It's gotten completely out of hand." "We have two choices," he continued. "Either we reclaim our original honeymoon plans completely, which means canceling everything your family has arranged and making it clear they are not welcome to join us in Hawaii, or we scrap Hawaii entirely and plan something else, something they don't know about." The thought of confronting my family with such a firm boundary terrified me. All my life, I'd been the good daughter who acquiesced to their wishes, who compromised to keep the peace. Standing firm against them, especially my mother, felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing how far I would fall. I broke down sobbing at the kitchen table. I felt torn between the family I'd grown up with and the family I was about to create with James. Part of me wanted to give in to just accept the honeymoon my family had planned to avoid the conflict. But another part, a part that was growing stronger with James' support, knew that this was a crucial moment. If I didn't establish boundaries now, this pattern would continue throughout our marriage. The next day, I decided to confront my mother directly. I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say. I needed to be firm but not cruel, clear but not confrontational. I needed to make her understand that this wasn't about rejecting her love, but about establishing our independence as a couple. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived, baking cookies for a church function. She smiled when I entered, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the honeymoon I began." "Oh, perfect timing," she exclaimed. "I just got off the phone with that cooking class instructor in Kauai. I managed to change your reservation to a private class instead of the group one you had booked. It costs a bit more, but I cut her off, something I rarely did." "Mom, stop. Please just stop." She looked at me with surprise, flour dusting her hands. "What do you mean?" "I mean that James and I had already planned our perfect honeymoon. We researched for months, saved for years, and made all the arrangements ourselves. But you've changed almost everything without our permission. You've booked different hotels, different activities, different restaurants. You've even shared our itinerary with other family members who now think they can join us. This is our honeymoon, Mom, not a family vacation." Her expression transformed from surprise to hurt to indignation in seconds. "Well, excuse me for trying to make your trip special," she responded, her voice rising. "I've spent countless hours researching the best options for you, calling to get you upgrades and special treatment. And this is the thanks I get. I didn't ask you to do any of that, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. We had already made our plans, plans that were meaningful to us. You didn't improve them. You replaced them with what you wanted. My father, hearing raised voices, came into the kitchen. What's going on? My mother immediately turned to him. Eva is being completely ungrateful about all the work we've done to help with their honeymoon. Dad, I interrupted. Did you know Mom has been rebooking our reservations without telling us? Did you know she's been telling family members when we'll be in Hawaii so they can meet up with us? My father looked uncomfortable. Well, she mentioned making some suggestions. They weren't suggestions, Dad, I said firmly. She actually canceled reservations we made and booked new ones. By now, my sister and brother had also wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the unusual sound of confrontation in our conflict-avoidant family. You're making such a big deal out of nothing, Amanda said, rolling her eyes. We were trying to help. How would you feel if I completely rearranged your vacation plans without asking? I challenged her. If I canceled restaurants you were excited about and booked different ones because I thought I knew better? Amanda opened her mouth to retort, but seemed to reconsider. The real blow came when I discovered that my mother had actually booked rooms for herself and my father at the same resorts where James and I would be staying, specifically requesting accommodations near ours. She had planned for them to be on the same islands at the same time, essentially shadowing our honeymoon, under the guise of having their own separate vacation. And then came the final straw, the moment that crystallized everything for me. As my mother defended her actions, she let slip that she'd planned a family dinner during our honeymoon, inviting extended family members who lived in Hawaii or would be visiting at the same time. She'd even put down a deposit at a restaurant, assuming we would naturally want to spend an evening of our honeymoon with relatives we rarely saw. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined my life. My mother's need to control, to be involved in every aspect of my existence, my father's passive enabling, my own reluctance to assert boundaries for fear of causing pain or conflict. It wasn't just about the honeymoon. It was about my entire relationship with my family and the kind of marriage I wanted to build with James, one based on mutual respect and independence. That evening, James and I sat at our dining table, with my laptop open between us. After my confrontation with my family, I'd left my parents' house feeling emotionally drained, but also strangely liberated. For perhaps the first time, it clearly articulated my feelings and needs even in the face of resistance. Now we had a decision to make. And as we talked through our options, I realized that this was about more than just our honeymoon. It was about establishing how we would function as a married couple, how we would protect our relationship from outside interference, however well-intentioned. James, I think we need to start fresh, I said finally. Hawaii has been tainted by all this drama. I don't think I could enjoy it knowing my family had been so involved, even if we reclaimed all our original plans. He nodded, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm with you, whatever you decide. But I think you're right. We deserve a honeymoon that's truly ours, from planning to experience. We spent the next few hours researching alternative destinations and quickly settled on Bali. Neither of us had mentioned it as a possibility before, and my family had no idea we were considering it. It offered everything we wanted: beautiful beaches, rich culture, adventure opportunities, and romantic settings, but with the added benefit of being completely disconnected from the plans my family had tried to impose. Before we booked anything new, however, I needed to address the existing reservations. While searching through emails, I made an important discovery. Because all the bookings were in my name, using my email address and contact information, I had access to all the confirmation numbers and cancellation options. My family had inadvertently given me complete control over the reservations they had made. Methodically, I began canceling everything: the upgraded flights, the resorts my mother had chosen, the activities she'd booked, the restaurant reservations. With each cancellation, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a sense of reclaiming not just our honeymoon, but our autonomy as a couple. Within 2 hours, every single Hawaii reservation had been canceled. The only trace of our planned honeymoon was now in our own private planning document, which we promptly archived. In its place, we created a new document for Bali and spent the rest of the evening excitedly planning our new adventure. We booked a beautiful villa with a private pool in Ubud for the first part of our stay, followed by a beachfront bungalow in Seminyak. We researched temples, rice terraces, cooking classes, and snorkeling spots. We found small local restaurants with authentic cuisine and scheduled a sunrise hike up Mount Batur. Every decision was ours alone, made based on our preferences and desires. As we finalized the bookings using a new email address created specifically for this purpose, I felt a newfound sense of confidence. This was what being an adult meant: making your own choices and accepting responsibility for them, even when those choices disappointed others. The next challenge was telling my family. I knew they would be hurt and angry, but I also knew that this was a necessary step in establishing healthy boundaries. After discussing it with James, we decided to announce our decision at the next family dinner, rather than telling them individually, which might lead to them trying to convince me separately. The anxiety I felt in the days leading up to that dinner was intense. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipated their reactions, and prepared responses. James assured me repeatedly that he would be by my side throughout the conversation, a united front. When Sunday finally arrived, we drove to my parents' house with a mix of dread and determination. The dinner itself was pleasant enough, with conversation focusing mainly on wedding details. But when dessert was served, I knew it was time. James and I have something to tell you. All I began, my voice steadier than I expected. We've decided to change our honeymoon plans. We're no longer going to Hawaii. There was a moment of confused silence around the table. Finally, my mother spoke. What do you mean you're not going to Hawaii? We've already made all the arrangements. Everything's booked and confirmed. I took a deep breath. We canceled all those reservations, Mom. We realized that the honeymoon had become something different from what we wanted. It had turned into a family project, rather than a special time for just the two of us. But all the work we've put in, my mother stammered, her face flushing. All the research, the special bookings, the upgrades. You can't just throw that away. We appreciate the thought behind it, James said gently. But a honeymoon is a private trip for newlyweds. We've planned an alternative that we're really excited about. So where are you going instead? My sister asked, her tone skeptical. James and I exchanged glances. We're keeping that private for now, I replied. We want to make sure this trip remains our own. My mother's expression hardened. So you're deliberately excluding us? After everything we've done to help make your honeymoon special, you're shutting us out completely. It's not about excluding you, Mom, I explained. It's about creating appropriate boundaries. A honeymoon is traditionally a trip for just the married couple. That's all we're asking for. This is ridiculous, my father interjected. Your mother put her heart and soul into planning the perfect Hawaiian honeymoon for you. She even used her connections to get you special treatment at those resorts. And now you're just throwing it back in her face? I felt a flash of anger. Those weren't connections, Dad. She was calling as a complete stranger, using my name and personal information to make bookings without my permission. That's not fair, my mother protested. I was only trying to help. If you just told me what you wanted. But we did tell you, I interrupted more forcefully than I'd intended. We told you multiple times that we were happy with our original plans. We told you we didn't want changes or upgrades. We told you we wanted to plan our own honeymoon. But you ignored us. The table fell silent. My mother stared at her dessert plate, her lips pressed tightly together. My father looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and my mother, as if trying to determine how to diffuse the situation. Amanda appeared annoyed, while Patrick seemed thoughtful, perhaps the only one truly hearing what I was saying. We didn't cancel everything yet, my mother finally said, her voice taking on the determined tone I knew well. We can still fix this. If Hawaii isn't what you want, we can look at other options. Maybe Europe or a cruise. Mom, I said firmly. We've already booked our new honeymoon. It's done. And we won't be sharing the details because we want this to be our trip planned by us, experienced by us. You can't be serious, she exclaimed, her voice rising. After all we've done, you're just going to book something without even consulting us, without even telling us where you're going? Yes, I replied simply. That's exactly what we're doing. The reaction was immediate and intense. My mother burst into tears, dramatically pushing away from the table and running upstairs. My father glared at me before following her. Amanda called me selfish and stormed out to the back patio. Only Patrick remained seated, his expression a mixture of surprise and what looked like respect. That went about as well as expected, James murmured, taking my hand under the table. I should have felt guilty. The old Eva would have been running upstairs to apologize to find some compromise that would soothe my mother's hurt feelings. But instead, I felt strangely calm. This was the right decision, even if it caused temporary pain. Sometimes setting healthy boundaries hurt initially, but led to better relationships in the long run. Chaos continued to swirl around us. I could hear my mother sobbing upstairs, my father trying to console her while occasionally shouting down comments about ingratitude and respect. Amanda had called her boyfriend and was loudly complaining about me on the phone. But through it all, I maintained my composure, strengthened by James' steady presence and the knowledge that we were fighting for the foundation of our marriage. The weeks following our announcement were tense, to say the least. My mother stopped calling me directly, instead relaying messages through my father or Patrick. When we did have to interact for wedding preparations, her approach vacillated between icy silence and passive-aggressive comments about loyalty and appreciation. My father was more direct in his disappointment, frequently bringing up how heartbroken my mother was and suggesting it wasn't too late to reconsider. Amanda remained openly annoyed with me, while Patrick surprisingly seemed to understand my position better than the others. He even pulled me aside one day to say that while he wished he'd handled it differently, he respected my right to plan my own honeymoon. Despite the family tension, James and I proceeded with our wedding planning now with clearer boundaries in place. I began explicitly stating which decisions were open for input and which were not. It was uncomfortable at first, but gradually my family began to adjust to this new dynamic. I also started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings of guilt and to develop better strategies for maintaining boundaries. She helped me understand that my family's reactions were not my responsibility, and that their difficulty accepting boundaries was their issue to work through, not mine. As the wedding day approached, the emotional toll of standing my ground became increasingly apparent. I lost sleep worrying about potential confrontations at the wedding. Would my mother make a scene? Would the family tension be visible to our guests? James reminded me repeatedly that whatever happened, we would face it together. On the morning of our wedding, as I was getting ready with my bridesmaids in a hotel suite, my mother came in to help me with my veil. For a few minutes, everything felt normal, like the loving mother-daughter relationship I always wanted. Then she spoke. "I still don't understand why you had to ruin all our beautiful Hawaii plans," she said quietly, adjusting my veil in the mirror. "We could have compromised somehow." I caught her eyes in the reflection. "Mom, today is my wedding day. I'm marrying the man I love. Let's focus on that joy instead of rehashing old disagreements." She pressed her lips together but nodded. "I suppose you're right. But I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did was because I love you and wanted the best for you." In that moment, standing in my wedding dress, minutes before walking down the aisle, I had a powerful moment of clarity. My mother did love me in her way. Her controlling behavior came from love, even if it was misguided and boundary crossing. Understanding this didn't mean I had to accept the behavior, but it helped me respond with compassion rather than anger. I turned to face her directly. "I know you love me, Mom, and I love you too. But part of loving someone is respecting their choices, even when you would make different ones. That's what I need from you going forward." She didn't reply, but something in her expression shifted slightly. I couldn't tell if it was acceptance or just a temporary truce for the sake of the wedding day, but it was enough for now. The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful, everything we had hoped for. As my father walked me down the aisle, I saw James waiting for me, his face filled with love and certainty. In that moment, any doubts I had about standing firm with my family vanished. This man was my future, my partner in creating a life based on mutual respect and understanding. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising not only love and fidelity, but also to respect each other's independence and to create a marriage where both our voices were equally valued. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the cheers from our friends and family momentarily bridged all the recent tensions. The reception was a blur of dancing, toasting, and celebrating. My mother, ever conscious of appearances, played the role of delighted mother of the bride perfectly. No guest would have guessed at the strain beneath the surface. She made a lovely toast about letting her daughter start a new chapter, which felt ironic given recent events, but was nevertheless appreciated. As the reception wound down, James and I slipped away to change for our departure. We had told everyone we were leaving for our honeymoon the next morning, but in reality, our flight to Bali was departing that night. This small deception was necessary to avoid any last-minute interference or questioning. We said goodbye to our families, accepting well wishes and hugs. My mother held me tightly and whispered, "Be safe wherever you're going." It was the closest thing to acceptance I'd heard from her, and I treasured it. In the privacy of our hotel suite, we changed quickly, grabbed our already packed suitcases, and slipped out through a side entrance where a prearranged taxi was waiting. As we drove to the airport, a sense of exhilaration replaced the tension of the past weeks. We were married, we were on our way to our honeymoon, and we had done it our way. The flight to Bali was long but peaceful. We slept for much of it exhausted from the wedding and the emotional weeks leading up to it. When we finally landed and stepped out into the warm, fragrant air of Bali, the distance from family drama felt both literal and metaphorical. Our driver met us at the airport, a friendly local man who pointed out sights as we made our way to our villa in Ubud. When we arrived, the staff greeted us with flower leaves and fresh fruit juice. Our villa was everything we'd hoped for: a beautiful blend of traditional Balinese architecture and modern comfort, with a private plunge pool and views of the surrounding rice terraces. That first evening, as we sat on our terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, James took my hand. "How does it feel?" he asked softly. "To be here, just the two of us on the honeymoon we planned together." I took a moment to check in with my emotions. "Perfect," I replied honestly. "I feel completely present, completely at peace. No distractions, no compromises, just us starting our marriage exactly as we wanted to." He smiled and leaned in to kiss me. I knew then that the difficult stand I'd taken with my family had been absolutely worth it. This was what a honeymoon should be: an intimate beginning to our life together, shaped by our own desires and choices. The contrast between the honeymoon we were experiencing and the family-orchestrated trip we'd avoided was stark. Here, our schedule was our own. We could sleep late if we wanted change plans spontaneously, or spend an entire day in our villa if the mood struck. There were no familial expectations to meet, no need to consider anyone's preferences but our own. We spent our days exploring ancient temples, hiking through rice terraces, taking cooking classes, and swimming in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. We ate at tiny local warongs and elegant beachfront restaurants. We had traditional Balinese massages and watched cultural dance performances. Every experience was chosen by us, enjoyed by us, and remembered by us, alone. In the peaceful environment of our honeymoon, far from the family dynamics that had caused so much stress, I began to process the larger meaning of what had happened. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about establishing who we would be as a couple and how we would relate to our families going forward. It was about breaking patterns that no longer served me and creating healthier ones in their place. Returning home from Bali was like stepping back into reality after a beautiful dream. We were relaxed-tanned and happier than ever, but I knew that family tensions still awaited resolution. My phone had been largely silent during our 2-week honeymoon, with only occasional texts from Patrick checking that we were safe and enjoying ourselves. The first week back, we focused on settling into our new apartment and writing thank you notes for wedding gifts. I deliberately delayed reaching out to my family, giving myself time to strengthen my resolve and process the insights I'd gained during our time away. Finally, about 10 days after our return, I made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. I decided that professional guidance would be helpful in navigating the complicated process of reshaping my relationship with my family. Dr. Lisa Matthews was a warm, insightful woman in her 50s who listened carefully as I recounted the honeymoon planning saga and the broader patterns of my family's involvement in my life. "What you're describing is a classic boundary issue," she explained after I'd finished. Your family, especially your mother, has a pattern of over-involvement that worked when you were younger, but isn't appropriate for an adult, particularly a newly married one. The good news is that you've already taken the most difficult step by asserting those boundaries around your honeymoon. But they were so hurt, I said, still feeling twinges of guilt. Especially my mom. Dr. Matthews nodded thoughtfully. When someone is used to having unlimited access to your life and decisions, any boundary feels like rejection. It's not about the honeymoon specifically. It's about them adjusting to a new relationship dynamic. This kind of transition is rarely smooth, but it's necessary for healthy adult relationships. Over the next few sessions, she helped me develop strategies for maintaining boundaries while still showing love and respect for my family. We role-played difficult conversations and worked on phrases I could use when boundaries were being crossed. Most importantly, she helped me understand that my family's emotional reactions were not my responsibility to fix or manage. Armed with these new insights, I decided it was time to begin rebuilding bridges, starting with the family member who seemed most open to understanding my perspective. I called Patrick and asked if he would meet me for coffee. At a quiet cafe near his apartment, I found my younger brother already waiting, looking somewhat apprehensive but welcoming. After catching up on basic life updates, I broached the subject we'd both been avoiding. "How is everyone doing?" I asked carefully. "Mom and Dad." "Amanda." Patrick sighed. "Mom's still pretty hurt, honestly. She doesn't understand why you went to such extremes with the honeymoon. Dad is mostly concerned about her feelings as usual. Amanda, well, she's Amanda. She thinks you're being dramatic, but we'll get over it eventually." I nodded, having expected as much. "And what do you think?" He considered the question seriously before answering. "I think I understand why you did what you did. Mom can be a lot. She's always been most intense with you because you're the oldest. I just wish things hadn't gotten so tense." "Me too," I agreed. But it was about more than just the honeymoon. It was about setting boundaries that should have been in place long ago. Patrick nodded. "I get that. And for what it's worth, I think it's probably healthy. But it's going to take time for them to adjust, especially Mom." We talked for over an hour with Patrick, providing insights into how the family had processed events during our absence. Apparently, my mother had cycled through hurt anger and eventually a sort of resigned confusion. My father had primarily focused on supporting her, while Amanda had already moved on to focusing on her own relationship dramas. Before we parted, I asked Patrick if he thought a family dinner would be a good idea. He suggested waiting another week or two, but thought it might be a positive step if everyone was prepared for a calm, non-accusatory conversation. 2 weeks later, James and I found ourselves driving to my parents' house for the first post-honeymoon family dinner. I was nervous but centered, reminding myself of the strategies Dr. Turker, Matthews, and I had discussed. The initial greetings were awkward but civil. My mother hugged me stiffly. My father gave a gruff welcome, and Amanda offered a casual hey as if nothing had happened. We moved to the dining room where the conversation stayed safely on neutral topics like Patrick's new job and a neighbor's renovation project. It wasn't until dessert that my mother finally broached the subject. So she said with forced casualness, "How was your mysterious honeymoon?" I exchanged glances with James before answering. "It was wonderful, thank you. We had an amazing time in Bali." "Bali," she repeated, setting down her fork. "That's where you went." Without telling anyone, I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom. As we explained before, we wanted our honeymoon to be just for us, but we'd be happy to show you some photos if you'd like to see the beautiful places we visited." This offer seemed to mollify her somewhat. After dessert, we gathered in the living room, and I shared selected photos from our trip on my tablet. I was careful about which ones I showed, keeping our most private moments and experiences to ourselves, but sharing enough to include them in our joy. Throughout the slideshow, my mother made occasional comments that revealed her lingering hurt. "That resort looks nice, but I read that the ones on the other side of the island have better service. And you know Hawaii has beaches like that too, without the 20-hour flight." I let these comments slide, refusing to be drawn into comparisons or justifications. Instead, I focused on sharing positive stories about the local people we'd met, the fascinating culture we'd experienced, and the beautiful temples we'd visited. As the evening wound down, there was still tension in the air, but it had diminished noticeably. Before leaving, I hugged each family member, including my mother, who held on a bit longer than usual. "I'm glad you had a good time," she whispered, and though it wasn't quite an apology or acknowledgement of the boundary issues, it felt like a small step in the right direction. Over the next 6 months, our relationship with my family slowly evolved. There were setbacks, like when my mother tried to surprise us by scheduling a contractor to renovate our bathroom as a housewarming gift without consulting us first. But there were also moments of progress, like when she actually asked if I wanted her help planning my 30th birthday celebration, rather than simply taking over. James and I developed a united approach to family interactions, supporting each other in maintaining healthy boundaries, while still participating in family events and traditions. We declined some invitations, accepted others, and made decisions based on what worked for us as a couple, rather than defaulting to family expectations. Our 1 year anniversary approached quickly, and we planned a weekend getaway to a nearby coastal town to celebrate. The night before our departure, James and I sat on our balcony with glasses of wine, reflecting on the past year. "Can you believe how much has changed?" I asked him, thinking of the personal growth it experienced since the honeymoon standoff. He smiled, taking my hand. "I'm incredibly proud of you, you know. Standing up to your family was one of the hardest things you could have done, but it was also one of the most important for our marriage." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. There are still moments when I feel guilty or wonder if I was too harsh. But then I remember how it felt to have our honeymoon nearly hijacked, and I know we did the right thing. "It's not just about the honeymoon," James said thoughtfully. "It's about establishing who we are as a couple, what our values are, and how we're going to navigate life together." That was the real victory. He was right. The honeymoon incident had forced me to examine patterns that had been in place my entire life. Patterns of acquiescence, of prioritizing family harmony over personal authenticity, of allowing others to make decisions that should have been mine alone. Breaking those patterns had been painful but necessary for my growth as an individual and for our health as a couple. A week after our anniversary, we attended another family dinner. The atmosphere was noticeably different from those tense gatherings a year earlier. My mother still occasionally overstepped, but less frequently and less dramatically. More importantly, I had developed the confidence to address these moments calmly and directly when they occurred. As we enjoyed coffee in the living room after dinner, my mother mentioned a cousin whose daughter was getting married. "She's having such a hard time with the planning," she said. "Her future in-laws are trying to take over everything." I told her she should stand firm and remember it's her wedding, not theirs. I nearly choked on my coffee catching James' eye across the room. He looked equally surprised. Was my mother actually advocating for boundary setting? It seemed the lessons of the past year had made an impression after all, even if she wasn't quite ready to apply them to her own behavior. On the drive home, James and I marveled at this small but significant shift. "Maybe people really can change," I said hopefully, "or at least become more self-aware." "It's a process," he replied, "for all of us. But we're moving in the right direction." And that was the heart of what I'd learned through this challenging year. Establishing boundaries wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process. It required consistency, courage, and compassion, both for others and for myself. There would always be moments of overreach and necessary correction, but with each cycle the patterns could become healthier. Looking back now, I realize that what initially felt like a crisis, my family taking over our honeymoon plans, was actually a gift in disguise. It forced me to confront long-standing dynamics that would have continued to undermine my marriage and personal growth if left unaddressed. It gave me the opportunity to establish a new, more authentic relationship with my family, one based on mutual respect rather than control and acquiescence. True love, I discovered, isn't about surrendering your autonomy or accepting boundary violations in the name of harmony. It's about honoring yourself and your partner enough to create a relationship where both people can thrive independently and together. It's about having the courage to stand firm when necessary, even when doing so causes temporary discomfort or conflict. As I look toward the future, I'm grateful for the lessons learned through that difficult time. Our marriage is stronger for having weathered that early storm together. My relationship with my family, while still a work in progress, is more honest and healthy than it has ever been. And most importantly, I've discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed, a willingness to protect what's important even when doing so is difficult. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you find the courage to stand firm? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Sometimes the most painful lessons lead to the most beautiful growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and clarity in your own boundary journeys.